Family members of those killed when Iran's military shot down a passenger jet 2 years ago are demanding the case go before the International Civil Aviation Organization and for the RCMP to launch a criminal investigation. The Association of Families of Flight PS752 victims is also calling for arrest warrants and government sanctions against senior Iranian political and military leaders and for the designation of Iran's paramilitary Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization. Nearly 140 of the 176 people killed in the January 8, 2020 incident had ties to Canada. And with us to discuss the sanctions and legal process is Ms. Sarah Teach. She is a senior fellow at the Macdonald-Laurier Institute and a legal advisor to the coalition, or the Canadian Coalition Against Terror. She is also one of the 5 legal advisors to the PS752 Association. Ma'am, welcome to Forum Daily.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, ma'am, so let's start with this. Can you briefly remind our viewers of the events leading to the downing of Flight PS752?
Of course. So the downing of Flight PS752 came amidst escalating tensions between the United States and Iran. It was on January 3rd, that's just 5 days before the crash, that Qasem Soleimani was assassinated by a U.S. drone strike. And less than 24 hours before the flight was downed by 2 missiles, the IRGC also attacked empty U.S. bases in Iraq. And then mere hours later, the 2 missiles were shot and downed Flight PS752, killing everybody on board.
All right, ma'am. Well, we know the Ontario Superior Court recently ruled that the missile attacks were intentional and an act of terrorism. So what does that mean for the families of the victims?
So more than that, they actually also awarded compensation, including punitive damages. And to my knowledge, that's the first time that a superior court in Ontario has ever done that in a case of a terrorist act. So it's highly significant. Only a handful of families were involved in that civil lawsuit, but what it means for them is that Iranian assets in Canada, at least excluding diplomatic property, can be seized and sold, and the proceeds used to compensate family members. It also sets a precedent potentially for the other family members that were involved, and perhaps they could go to court as well.
And how has the Iranian government responded so far to this?
So this last week was the anniversary of the killing of Soleimani, the attack on the U.S. air bases, and the downing of Flight PS752. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the Iranian regime has focused on the former two and not focused on the downing of Flight PS752. So what we saw most strikingly, perhaps, was that for the 2-year anniversary of the killing of Soleimani, Iran imposed sanctions on more U.S. officials.
All right, ma'am. Well, we mentioned the Ontario Superior Court's recent move, but what has the Canadian federal government done so far to address the attack?
Canada is part of a coordination and response group. So that includes not just Canada, but also Sweden, the UK, countries that had citizens on board the flight. So that group recently came out with a statement acknowledging that further negotiations with Iran would be futile and that next steps would be taken to seek accountability in international law. So hopefully then what comes next is those action steps precisely, with Canada in concert with these other countries seeking remedies using international law.
All right. Well, we mentioned that the association that's representing the families of the victims is calling for stronger action, including designating the Islamic Revolutionary Guard as a terrorist organization. So what is the significance of this, and is this a realistic ask?
For sure, it's realistic. It should have happened a long time ago. The Quds Force is already a listed terrorist entity in Canada. The Quds Force is the part of the IRGC that engages in clandestine operations abroad, funding terrorist proxies all over the region. So what this downing further proves, we already knew this, but what it shows is that the IRGC is also committing terrorist acts domestically in the airspace over Tehran. So certainly the entire IRGC should be listed.
All right, well, just about a minute left in this interview, ma'am, but what are you watching for as this case progresses?
I'm watching for, the case to progress, for Canada to continue on those next steps that it's indicated that it will do. Watching for Canada to use international legal mechanisms to hold Iran to account and seek justice for the family members.
All right, just 30 seconds left in this interview, but where can our viewers go to learn more about the Canadian Coalition Against Terror?
CCAT has a website. There's also a Twitter. It's all over the internet. Check it out. As well, the PS 752 Association. I'd encourage interested viewers to check out their website and their Twitter. You could also follow me on Twitter, and I post regularly about both organizations.